and the freedom of a fresh start. Freedom and limitless growth for some meant annihilation for others, and within decades, the new arrivals had killed between 85 and 90% of North America's existing inhabitants, an estimated 50 million people, through disease, enslavement, famine, and murder. By 1610, the end of farming, fire, and other land use practices that resulted from that genocide led to the regeneration of over 50 million hectares of forest, woody savanna, and grassland across the so-called New World. That newly unfettered plant growth sucked up between 5 and 40 gigatons of carbon dioxide, enough to contribute to a little ice age. From the Latin word for world, Lewis and Maslin call this extraordinary moment the Orbis spike, implying that colonialism, global trade, and coal brought about the Anthropocene. Annexing the Americas made industrialization possible, creating new flows of cheap resources and new markets for manufactured goods, subsidized by slaughter and slavery. The United States' original sin took an enormous amount of carbon out of the atmosphere. Not all emissions upticks and reductions are created equal. The sweeping scientific terms used to describe the climate crisis, of epochs and degrees and parts per million, obscure the sheer amount of human suffering that has fueled it. The largest single cause of climate change is particular humans moving about this earth and doing particular things to it and to one another, including pouring prodigious amounts of greenhouse gases into the sky. Some humans deem some lives more valuable than others in the hunt for profit. An imperfect shorthand for these processes is capitalism. Capitalism hasn't tended to be a popular protagonist in stories about the climate crisis. Often, it's said to be a matter of faulty psychobiology. We humans are hopelessly greedy, hardwired not to deal with the earth-shattering consequences of our wasteful ways. We have trained ourselves, whether culturally or evolutionarily, to obsess over the present, journalist Nathaniel Rich wrote in his blockbuster New York Times Magazine story about a failed early round of climate talks. We worry about the medium term and cast the long term out of our minds, as we might spit out a poison. Facing undoubtedly long odds, it's tempting to turn inward, too, seeking personal absolution by lowering your carbon footprint, have fewer kids, take fewer flights, and turn off the lights when you leave the room. Yet, not long after Watt first fine-tuned his steam engine, just 90 corporations, almost all of them fossil fuel producers, have been responsible for 2/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions. Since 1965, just 20 shareholder and state-owned fossil fuel producers have spewed out 35% of the world's energy-related carbon dioxide and methane emissions. The richest 5% of the world's population, by and large those most insulated from the effects of the climate crisis, consume more energy than the poorest 50%. In 2015, then ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson's $145 million worth of shares in his company made the future Secretary of State responsible for over 52,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions that year alone, well over 3,200 times that of the average American, 6,400 times of the average resident of China, and 38,400 times of the average Indian. Unlike ExxonMobil and other fossil fuel firms, the average residents of those countries had not funded elaborate disinformation campaigns to spread doubt about whether those emissions were a problem, lobbied governments for their rights to continue extracting, nor spent vast sums painting themselves as the solution to problems they have continued to fuel. Diffusing responsibility for this crisis to the masses, or chalking it up to innate human greed, is a convenient narrative for Tillerson and his ilk. It also happens not to be true. This book is about various kinds of climate denial and how to overcome them in time to salvage a livable future.